Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 86. 86 is a very good number, a very good year. Yours truly was born in 86. So we're going to treat this as a double celebration of the year of my birth, my existence, my presence on this very show. And as the very next best episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, I'm with my co-hosts Mark and Kellen. Say hello.
I was already alive for like 6 years at this point. So.
Oh, I was going to go with it was your 21st, right?
I preempted the joke. I knew the joke was coming.
You saw the look on my face.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And so you jumped in.
Exactly.
Like you normally do. Like a angsty 15-year-old.
Were you an angsty 15-year-old in 86, Kellen?
Wasn't even alive.
Today on this show, we are going to be talking about games that we are ashamed that we've never played. So whether these are games we own or games that people have been telling us about for years that we ought to play, or games that are just very near and dear to certain themes or sort of licenses that we sort of hold dear to us. For whatever reason, if these are games that we feel that we should have played by now, for whatever reason haven't, we will be talking about those today. We're going to be doing that as a top 5 countdown. Before we get there, as we always do, let's talk about the games that we've been playing this week. Kellen, what have you been playing?
Yeah. Wow. A little crack there, the 15-year-old in me. So we had a great time at Strategicon this past weekend. And at conventions, you inevitably play a lot of smaller games, lighter games. Everything we talk about when we organize game nights is amplified at a convention. You're trying to meet people, say hello to people, organize games, get multiple tables going, and it's challenging. So the Oink games from Japan are always come to the rescue. So we got to play a new favorite, Nine Tiles Panic, a game we picked up at Gen Con, which is the make a 3x3 grid as fast as you possibly can that must adhere to a couple of different scoring rules. And then the ties for those scoring conditions are broken by whoever completed their city first. It has adorable aliens on it. There are alien invasions. There are cute dogs. Everything you could want in a very simple game that probably plays in 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. We had a great time playing Nine Tiles Panic with a big group of people. I think it goes up to 5? No, maybe only 5.
5. It goes up to 5.
That's a big group of people. 5. Sure. Yeah. You know, the 3 of us and 2 others.
Yep.
There you go.
So this is the new Oink Games release, and I definitely highly recommend it. It will never change your mind if you don't like real-time games, but I think it's very, very pleasant and fun. Mark also made out with one of my components this weekend.
I kissed the first player to finish tile many times because I was often the first player to finish.
I was waiting for many times because that was actually the...
Well, I mean, I sort of rushed the game because of how
many times you kissed it?
I was kissing it a lot because it was often came into play because I was often scoring a lot of points.
I didn't realize that I would have wanted to sleeve my cardboard components, but I should have done that because then I could just swap out a sleeve.
Whenever you play with me, you can rest assured that saliva is getting on your components.
What?
That's
Let
terrifying.
that be a lesson to you, to Neelan, and to all our listeners.
I'm suddenly very glad that I do sleeve all of my games.
But let us talk about a new to us Oink game that we also got to play. This is an older Oink game that actually at one point was published by Yellow as well. And I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, so I apologize. This is Kobayakawa. So that's Kobayakawa. And this is going to be helpful for Neelan when he's writing the show notes. You're welcome, Neelan. So this is a poker-esque derivative. It is a game of bluffing, of deduction. There is a deck of cards from 1 to 15. Everybody gets one of those cards secretly, and the goal is at the end of the round to have the highest number. However, there is a face-up card that is called the Kobayakawa card, and that card will actually be added to the lowest player's score for that round. So if you have the 15, you may think that you're going to win, but if that face-up card is a 12 and someone else has 4 and that's the lowest card, they're actually going to beat you in the big reveal. So the way that the game works is that everyone gets one action, and that action is either to change the card in the middle of the table and reveal new information while also changing what that number is that's added to the round, or you can draw another card from the deck and then compare it to the card that you have and choose one of those 2 cards. After everyone has had a chance to do either of those 2 things, everyone will start bidding, poker style. I don't know all my poker terms. I'm not a huge poker player, but ultimately you're bidding, you're calling...
Raising, calling.
All the poker words, Mark.
Yeah.
Say them.
Yeah. Raise, call.
What about ante?
Check, ante. Mm-hmm. There are 2 blinds, although they're equal, but yes.
And then you reveal and someone collects all the money and everyone screams. It's very simple and straightforward and very good.
Yeah.
As a distillation of poker, as something you can play very casually, get through a round in maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And there is a true element of bluffing where I won a couple of hands where I had basically nothing and I just looked confident and I took all of Mark's money.
Although that was me bluffing you. That wasn't you.
Well, you weren't kissing anything in this game.
I wasn't. I was out too quickly. The saliva would have dried out in no time.
I had all of the coins.
You did have all the coins.
And it comes with a lot of nice
yeah.
metal coins. This is a heavy little oink box, heavy little pig.
I've had my eye on this game for a while. Although by the time we got to play it, it was one of those situations where the name rung a bell to me. I knew that I liked it, but I had no idea what the rules were. I just remember at one point looking it up and saying, oh, this is sort of clever, and then forgetting what was clever about it. But yeah, I really liked it. It's a very simple, like you said, poker derivative that I think would probably be pretty easy to introduce to non-gamers, and it probably is a good game to offer to people who are fans of poker because of the similarities.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems to have appealed across both bases exactly. Like, it's a game that you could play with people without having to teach them all the poker terms and all the hand strengths, but would be equally appealing to someone that loves that style of game.
Yeah, there was a booth worker at Gen Con at the Oink Games booth, and he told me that this was his favorite of their games.
Oh, wow.
But you couldn't buy it at Gen Con. They had either sold out or just didn't have a new batch, and so he helped me order it on a website to get shipped to me there at Gen Con. So not that I condone, because I don't condone board game piracy, but this would be a fairly simple one to make a little print and play of with 15 cards and some chits. Probably do it with no thanks without even breaking a sweat. But I love the physical production. I'm super glad to have it and buy the game. And this is where I would say the name of the game again if I could, which is Kobayakawa.
And not that we condone gambling, but you could very easily replace those very nice metal coins with dollar bills.
Yeah.
And then have a Kobayakawa night as opposed to a poker night.
And at the end of the day, I'd be kissing my wonderful girlfriend, the blue tank, because I'd have so much money.
We all played this, actually. The game I'm going to be talking about is...
Selfish Neelan.
Is Selfish Neelan? What? Why am I selfish? What did I do?
Mark.
Yeah.
Can you prepare a clip montage of Neelan saying the word I?
Oh, yeah, I got that ready.
Perfect.
I've been preparing that for
You have it on
months.
speed dial?
Yeah. Right.
Of me saying the word I?
Yeah.
How many times I say the word I?
Yeah,
You
you
played
don't-
Taj Mahal.
Wait, you think?
Okay,
Are you saying it's weird that I have a montage of you saying the word I?
I wouldn't think that I would be the one that we would be branding as the most selfish.
Who would you think
No.
that is, Neelan?
Mark, clearly. We all played Taj Mahal. We played this with friends of the podcast at the con, Daniel and Nate. This is a Reiner Knizia auction game. It is, in fact, my favorite Knizia game.
Whoa. It's your favorite Knizia game?
Yeah, I knew it was hovering near the top, and then I just checked my list. Is there something I'm not thinking about? And then, yeah, Blue Lagoon and Taj Mahal are sort of close to each other, but...
And you've yet to play Raw.
I've yet to play Raw.
Okay.
Or modern art.
But,
Or what?
Or modern
Or
art,
modern.
right?
Or modern art, yeah. Which
But-
I suspect that I will like a lot.
Let's put a pin in it, because your enthusiasm is great. I don't know that it's an auction game.
I mean, it's
If
definitely an auction
everything
game.
an auction game?
Well, no, but it's a game where there's a commodity that comes out.
Are you disrespecting the pin
the pin?
that we put it in?
No, that's where we have to clarify this. Because the way that this works is there's a map of locations, and each of the locations are numbered 1 to 12, and the locations represent separate lots, basically. And each lot sort of has a bunch of different things on sale, and those are either locations where you can place a palace, a elephant tile in the middle, which gets you sort of specific commodities, which are worth points, or a mogul, which the player who wins that also gets to place a palace in one of the spots of their choice, adjacent to another player's. So if you imagine these locations on the maps of all connected by roads, each region has 4 palace spots around it, connected by roads, and all these roads are connected to other regions. So by placing palaces, by winning bids, you're creating a network chain of palaces, which will get you more and more points, because every time you place a palace, you don't only score a point for the palace, but for every region that is connected by a road to that palace. So how does this work? We go to region 1 at the beginning of the game, and everyone has a hand of cards. On these cards are 4 different advisors. There is the aforementioned mogul and an elephant, and there are combinations of these symbols on the cards, normally 1 or 2. So let's say I play a card that has 2 elephants. That's me bidding off of the right to win the elephants tile that round. We go to the next player. They play a card. Some of these cards can be supplemented with other cards, but generally you're playing 1 or 2 cards. And we keep going around. By the time it gets back to you, you have 2 choices. You're either going to continue adding cards to your array, but there are some limitations on how you can do that. Or you pull your cards and you take the prizes that you are currently leading on. So by the time it gets back to me, if I still have the most elephants out, I'm the one that's going to claim the elephant tile. There are some other little bonuses associated with winning advisors multiple times in a row, which give you these special cards, which are quite cool because instead of having to discard them at the end of a round, you just get to hang on to them. But then otherwise, you're just at the end of each bid collecting more cards to go into your hand. Some turns you'll just have to flop and say, you know what, I'm just taking cards this round because you're going to run out of cards very quickly otherwise. So it's a game of sort of picking your battles, finding the right time to play the cards you have in order to acquire either the palaces or the merchant tiles that you need in order to score a bunch of points. That's a basic summary of Taj Mahal. Like I said, it's one of my favorite auction games and probably my favorite Knizia game because there's such a tight economy to the way that the cards come out because it's that every round, of which there are only 12 in the game, is this very hard decision of, well, I've played a card to start this bid. I maybe played 2 or 3 cards to start this bid. Do I pull out now and maybe sort of get less than I hope to get? Or do I just say, screw it, I'm out. I might not get anything for it, but at least I'm not wasting any more cards.
And you're building up for the future.
Exactly. And you're potentially saving cards that you could use in the future round. Because of the way that you can see every single lot that is in the game at the start of the game, you can effectively plan for very specific rounds. Like you might know, I have to get round 5 because that's a crucial placement of my palaces or a specific tile that's going to be a lot of points for me. So I'm going to be banking up my cards in rounds 3 and 4 to make sure I win round 5. There are a lot of really, really fun decisions in Taj Mahal that feel quite brutal.
Yeah, it's very, very agonizing game where you have a hand of elephants and you play one out and then you just look around the table and say, no one else better go elephants this round. And then Mark lays down an elephant and smiles at you, and then you get into a very expensive proposition, a very expensive affair that neither of you can afford to be in because the other players at the table will profit. So it's about ducking out when you can and getting a little something and then saving it for the future when you actually need it and then going big. The ability to end an auction, let's call it that, the ability to end an auction when you're one up without allowing other players to bid above you makes it feel less like an auction game to me and more like, let's assume that playing an elephant is like playing one attack card. It's more a game, in my opinion, of hand management than it is of just a straight auction game. What do you think of this idea of it as an auction game? Obviously, there's an auction, but...
Yeah, I think by the literal definition of an auction game, it is. But I agree with you that if somebody was asking me for, like, what are the quintessential auction games? What are the auction games that will best give me the flavor of what an auction game is? I would not put this among the top.
And I would agree with that because it certainly is, if you were to describe that to someone, it's not like any other auction game. That's fair.
Your ability to withdraw, if you're up, if you have 2 elephants and everyone else at the table has 1 when it gets back to you, even though Mark may want to increase his bid for more elephants, he's unable to because you're like, bye-bye, guys, I'm in charge of elephants.
Right.
That makes it feel quite unique in that way.
Which sort of gets to one of the things, again, that makes this unique and sort of where it deviates from the auction. And something that I'd forgotten about this game until our play yesterday is how important the timing aspect of it is. Because there's some times where you know that you can win multiple battles. Like, I know I can win monks and viziers or whatever it is. But the placement of your castle is more important to you than winning multiple battles.
Right.
There were situations where if I end now, I win one, but I know that I have so many red cards that I could win anything I wanted. But if I don't exit now, there's a chance somebody else exits and takes the spot that I need. So there's the push and pull of waiting, even if you know you're going to win, but losing out on the area control aspect that is important versus sticking in. There's that tempo aspect where you need to maybe play suboptimally in terms of winning a lot for the tempo edge, for like the get out quick.
Right.
I've forgotten, or maybe I never realized how important turn order was. Turn order, rotates around every turn, but there were times where I had wished I was the first player because I have the first chance to exit, and that needing to exit the bidding would have been vital for me.
Yeah, because there are quite a few sort of specific points that can make every round quite brutal. Like one of the ones you described, which is exactly that. Like, you need a specific and quite a specific spot on the thing to connect, say, two massive regions that you've been building, right? And this region only comes up once in the game. So if you lose your chance, you've lost it. Someone withdraws before you and places your temple in that spot, and that's devastating.
And that's something you need to consider, because we're in this bidding, and I know that I could get out now, but I'm sort of greedy because I have like a lot of cards, and maybe I want to get a second thing that I'm confident I can get. And then I look at Kellen, who's leading in one thing now, and he's coming up next in turn order. But if Kellen bows out, what's the likelihood that based on what his board looks like, he's going to take the one spot that I need?
Right.
So there's all these like considerations you have to make.
Absolutely. And that's saying nothing of the fact that if you withdraw from a bid after the first turn, you're losing cards, and maybe losing those cards without any reward potentially. Right. So yeah, there are a bunch of different avenues where Taj Mahal doesn't feel great a lot of the time, let's say. That said, I kind of admire that brutality of it, quite frankly, because it's very minimal in its economy, for lack of a better word. You don't have a ton of cards to work with. You don't have a ton of good spots to work with. Every single action needs to be quite calculated to benefit off it to the maximum amount.
And this is also cool. This is sort of the ye old Euro game that we talk about that has a lot more interaction in it. There is a newer Z-Man Games edition of it that is very beautiful. It's super saturated. Taj Mahal is on my top 50 games of all time, and something I just consider a quintessential classic. But that's not necessarily shared, perhaps. It's one of, I wouldn't say it's not the top 5 Reiner Knizia games by rank, certainly. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it falls on Board Game Geek or the consensus, the Board Game Intelligentsia consensus.
Who's part of the consensus now?
Right. Well, we're definitely part of the Board Game Intelligentsia. Well, 2 of us are part of the Board Game Intelligentsia's consensus.
That's a type of coffee. Intelligentsia.
I think it's without doubt a top tier Knizia. I would probably say it's top 10, if not higher than that. But for some reason, like Neelan was saying, I love the brutality of it as well. I love brutality in these little card games and that kind of stuff. But I'm just so awful at this game. I always feel like I'm out of my depth, or I'm losing, or it's just a game that I can never like fully embrace, because I just never feel like I never have a game where I'm like, yes, I'm doing great at this.
Right. My hope is at least that people know from that description whether it's a game that will sound good to them and their group, because I know plenty of people I would never play Taj Mahal with, because being on the sort of the back foot of that punishing a game, it's not short. We're talking about an hour plus maybe. It can be quite devastating. That is Taj Mahal.
So I played a game. Not with you two.
What?
Because I was trying to upgrade
a game we weren't even invited to.
Well, I was invited by a third party. That third party was Ruel from the 5x podcast. He called me up. He's like, I need a board game luminary to join in on this game of...
And I was unfortunately busy that night, so...
Yeah, he actually messaged both of us in succession before you. Started with Neelan, came to me.
I think I'm right in saying this is the quintessential convention game. I'd say top 5 convention games and top 5 4X games. This is Twilight Imperium 4th edition, which is a game that I have not played in any edition. And a game that I had it sort of on my board gaming bucket list because of like the lore around it, the idea that, people play this game and it runs, 8 hours, or, there's like dinner breaks in between, and this like, it had built up a mythology, I think, in the board game world, and certainly in my own head about what it was. And I knew about the dice rolling, and it just seemed like this crazy, crazy game that I wanted to scratch off my board gaming bucket list, but I wasn't honestly super excited to play because I didn't think it would be for me. But Ro was kind enough to invite me, and it was a morning that I had some time free, so I played. So for those who are not familiar with Twilight Imperium, this is the recently published, this was last year, 4th edition game. This is a game that has quite a number of folks who would consider it their favorite game of all time. I think part of that is tied into the experiential aspect of it, because this is a game where you are going to be there for, in my case, a scant 5 hours, but it can go much, much longer. It's a 4X game, so you've got this like space opera aspect to it, so it's got appeal in that regard. The way it plays is you are head of one of a number of different alien factions. Each of the alien factions have their own power, and it's a race to 10 points. First person to score 10 victory points wins the game immediately. And the way it works is there are 4 phases to the game. There's first the strategy phase. In the strategy phase, each player selects a strategy card, which will give them, during that round, a special power. This may be to basically get more action tokens, which you're going to spend later to take actions during the game. It may give you a tech bump. It may give you an opportunity to score victory points in a special way. So it breaks the game for you in a unique way. And whenever you play this strategy card during your turn, all players have an opportunity to follow you, sort of a la Glory to Rome, in a lesser way. So you have the better version of it, but all players can follow you in a lesser way. After the strategy phase is done, there's the action phase, which is the meat of the game. And this is where you're taking actions. You are building your fleet, you're landing on planets around the board, you're conquering them. You can use those planets for resources or for influence. Resources are used to build your fleet. Influence that you can get from different planets are used in a voting phase that's going to come up later. After the action phase is a very quick status phase, which is basically a cleanup. And then there is an agenda phase, which happens once somebody has conquered the central chief planet in the game, this planet called Macao Rex. Yes.
Why do I remember that? That's weird.
So this is like the main planet in the center of the board that everybody's sort of racing to. The first person to get to Macao Rex gets a victory point just for getting to it. So once somebody has landed on Macao Rex, this last phase comes up, which is the agenda phase. During the agenda phase, a card is revealed from this agenda deck, which could be a law or a directive. Then that law or directive is voted on by the players. Each player has a number of votes equal to their influence based on the planets they have. If a law passes, it becomes a new rule in the game. If a directive passes, it becomes a one-time thing that happens at that moment in the game. That part of the game is especially rife in negotiation. You can trade pretty much anything you want. I think aside from victory points, you can trade anything you want with your opponent. So trade resources for votes. And so that's basically the structure of the game. There's obviously a ton more to it, as you might expect in a game that goes 5 to 8 to longer hours. But to make a long story shorter, I will say that I very much enjoyed my play of Twilight Imperium 4. I was surprised by how much I liked it. It's not a game that I will buy because of the investment in terms of the needing to get people committed to a 5 to 8 hour game is obviously quite difficult. But it's a game that, whereas before playing, if somebody had said to me, like at a convention, are you in on a game of Twilight Imperium? I would lean no. Even if I had the time, I would probably think that my time is better spent elsewhere. Now, I'd be excited to play it again. I know Ruel has it crazily enough on his 10 by 10. He's trying to play it 10 times during the year, and I think this game was his 8th of it, so that's okay. Nuts. Yeah. But his 8th game was a loss to a rookie, and that rookie was a Meier.
So now there's a copy of Twilight Imperium with slobber all over it.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the first time I was playing with all of them, so I made sure that I excused myself for a second, but then I licked everything.
So I have played Twilight Imperium 4th edition once and 3rd edition once, and both times left kind of cold. It feels like a lot of build-up, a lot of amassing troops for 3 to 4 hours, and then some battles, and if you lose a big battle, you lose the game. So my question to you is you've got your tech tree, which is cool.
Yep.
You've also got that in Comet. You've got that in quite a few other much shorter games.
Yeah.
You've got your feisty fighting, which is cool.
Yeah.
But you got that in Cthulhu Wars and other games. You've got your politics that you're arguing and negotiating, but there's quite a few much shorter negotiation games, right. Even New Angeles, which is half as long or even a little, perhaps even less long.
So yeah, why wouldn't you just play 6 different games instead of this?
No. Neelan. Bad Neelan.
Sorry.
So with the amalgamation of all of that, like what about it combined kind of clicked with you?
Well, okay, so
this is a real question, Neelan.
No,
You're derailing.
I'm
like
very
an
sorry.
15-year-old.
Wow.
Well, okay, I want to preface all of this by saying that I was going to say that this is not a top 100 game for me, but it might be. But I just don't want to... It's tough. I would say that to answer your question, and Neelan sort of partially did it, all those games probably give you a better experience of all those aspects in a shorter time, but none of those games specifically, and I don't know if there are any games, I'm sure there are some games, that give you all the experiences in one package, albeit a very big package, but one package. I also very much enjoyed the double asymmetry of the game. There is the asymmetry of your race, which is super cool.
Space Lions.
Space Lions. I was the University of Jornal. Space Nerds.
Excellent.
But the Space Nerds won. So that's an asymmetry that is fixed during the entire game. There are also the asymmetry of the strategy cards, which happens every round, which is crucial. That asymmetry is like key, but it's always a different flavor of it. So it's as cool as your race asymmetry is, that can get stale over 8 hours or whatever. But the fact that there's always another shot of asymmetry every round is very cool.
So would you rather play this or Diplomacy tomorrow?
This.
Would you rather play this or Dune tomorrow?
With the same group? With the group that no,
are you saying
no,
you like us or Rule better? Is that what we're arguing about now?
Well, we could make that argument, but no, I'm saying like with you guys
in the best possible circumstances.
Right, which to be clear is you guys. I would rather play Dune or this. I think this. You know why? Because I think Dune is awesome, but I think Dune has a lot of funkiness, which is cool. It's cool, but there was a stop-start grindiness to Doom that maybe would be alleviated on a second play, but Twilight Imperium had some bits and some questioning and some reverting to the rulebook and some checking the Board Game Geek forums to be fair about how rules were meant to be played. But it just felt, because this is the 4th edition, that things were pretty streamlined, quote unquote, for a streamlined 5-hour game. Mm-hmm. I just would like to play this game with you guys. I think it would be really fun. I'm actually, and I told you this, somewhat surprised that you don't like it more than you appear to like it. I would ask because I wonder what the player count was, because I've heard that this was best at 6, and Ruel even said it's best at 6, and he's played it again 8 times already this year. But we played it at 4, and that felt pretty perfect because during the agenda phase there are 8 powers, and I guess in maybe any game with more than 4 players, so a 5 and above game, each person gets one of the powers, and in a less than 8-player game there are some powers that are not taken. In a 4-player game, all the cards are taken. So everybody has 2 powers, which made it even cooler because you have like 2 asymmetric powers on top of the one you already start with in terms of the race.
Yeah, I played it with the max player count, which I'm not sure. I think I played 3rd edition with 8 and 4th edition with either 4 or 5.
Okay.
I enjoy Twilight Imperium. I just don't... It feels like Risk with a bunch of stuff added to it, to be honest. The amassing troops, the like gingerly, slowly moving out from your sector and dinking and dunking for points. That doesn't...
Which is what I thought it was. But the thing is, you can only amass so many troops because you have a hard limit, which you can manipulate. But that's a cool part of the game. Like, you have a certain amount of resources that you can devote to A, taking actions, B, troop size, and C, following. And that dynamic, and seeing somebody suddenly move their resources from the taking action spot to the troop size spot is like a signal. Like, wait, why are they all of a sudden devoting their resources to troop size? That is like a cool aspect of the game. It's like an indicator that this person is now going to be on the warpath. So I just say like all my concerns were to one degree or another alleviated. Okay. And again, I just had a very fun time with it. It's not a game that I'm clamoring to play again tomorrow, but I would love to play it at the next convention for sure.
I've also actually been genuinely surprised that this isn't one that we've tried to do as a group together, because besides the fact that it does take a long time and we would have to organize a day around it, and the opportunities we get to do that aren't that frequent, it's a game that I've played once and only in the 3rd edition, so I can't comment to the changes, which I believe are quite substantial between 3 and 4.
I hear that the biggest one, I think, is the tech tree, which I guess was fairly convoluted in the 3rd edition, which is quite streamlined.
Yeah. And if I'm being honest, I don't even super remember, because I played it once years and years ago, and I remember not loving it. But again, I couldn't even tell you specifically why. I remember the one thing, I'm curious to see if this is something that would still be a problem in the 4th edition. I remember having an objective at the start of the game that was counter to how I wanted to play the game. And it was like, you have 2 secret objectives and you choose one to keep, and both of them were quite aggressive. And I was like, I didn't want to do this.
Right.
It seemed to be focusing me down a specific play style that I didn't want to do, which is a big deal in a game that's that long.
Yeah, and a game where you're going up to 10 points and that secret objective is one of them.
Right.
I don't know how it was handled in the 3rd edition. In the 4th edition, there is some of that.
Yeah.
There is definitely some of that, but you can acquire more secret objective cards, and actually I had acquired way more than I could have by the time the game was over. So it never, the acquisition of secret objectives never felt like an issue to me, but maybe that was partially lucky on my end, you know?
Right. I honestly, yeah, like I said, I could even be wrong about how big specifically it was in effect, even on the third edition.
Your play was with 4 players?
My play was at 4 players,
Okay.
yeah.
And how long did it take approximately? Do you
You know
remember?
what? I have no idea. I know it was at least 4 hours. It was definitely in that range.
Okay, so it wasn't like crazy long.
It wasn't.
like
No, it
12
wasn't
hours.
ridiculously long. I mean, I don't think so. At least I remember being generally unsatisfied with it,
Yeah.
but not in a way that made me think it was a bad game. Just not something I would be hard pressed to be like itching to play again. But I wouldn't turn down a game of with the right people.
Do you remember where you finished, sort of, generally?
No, I
Because
know I didn't win.
I wonder if this is a game, and it probably is a game where if you fall behind, if like 2 hours in, hey, you look up and, hey, I realize like I don't have much of a chance. If that will be discouraging. I don't know. Any 3 of the 4 of us could have won this game. It was really cool because there were like 3 or 4 moments of like, hey, the game could end right now. And those 3 or 4 moments involved the 3 of the 4 players.
Interesting.
So that like Titanic swing
Yeah.
felt very, very cool, and felt like, hey, these are cool gaming moments, which is like something I think we all are sort of hunting for.
Yeah, and that's exactly the sort of thing you'd want to happen multiple times in that sort of game. Yeah, I can see it.
And that is Twilight Imperium, 4th edition by Fantasy Flight.
We should do, when New Eclipse comes, we should play both.
That would be cool.
In a weekend.
Yeah,
Nealon says it. Weekend.
A weekend. Yeah, I actually, one of the things I neglected to say is partly one of the reasons that Twilight Imperium sort of fell back in my mind was having played Eclipse. I was like, this felt like what I wanted from Twilight Imperium. So I'm definitely excited to get that to the table once it comes. So before we continue, we like to read reviews at this point in the podcast. Reviews are a great way to help us grow as a podcast. If you like what we do and you want to support us in some fashion, there are a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is our Patreon, which is still ongoing. You can check that out at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage or boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon. We have both. Or the other thing you can do is leave us a review. So if you go into Facebook, if you go into Apple Podcasts, I believe Stitcher also supports reviews. Whatever platform you're listening to us on or you feel the most comfortable leaving a review on, please do so. We'd really appreciate it. It doesn't have to be 5 stars. Could be 5 stars. Yeah, just go with your gut. If your gut says 5 stars, then give us 5 stars.
If your gut says anything less than 5 stars, just 5 stars.
Maybe think of something else. Yeah, exactly. Maybe come back another day.
Take some Tums.
Yeah, exactly.
And then write the review.
We love to read them out on the show, though, so let's do that right now. This review comes to us from Shifty Squirrel 05. It is titled Almost Rated 4 Stars. So that would have been a good one to have gone with your gut on a different day, perhaps. But thankfully, it is a 5-star review. Thank you very much, Shifty Squirrel. You said, Kellen is great on the podcast. However,
I can see how this was almost a 4-star review.
I almost had to go 4 stars because Kellen occasionally has to stop talking to breathe.
What?
Which allows the other host to jump into the conversation. Hopefully, Kellen learns to practice circular breathing soon so I can get his insightful opinions straight into my ear holes without the background noise.
Wow.
Maybe...
What is circular breathing?
It's like, isn't it something like where you exhale through your nose and breathe through your mouth?
Totally,
Like
so that you can... So
Can you actually just keep talking?
I don't know. Let's not find out.
Well, this is very beautiful review.
Yeah.
Probably the most eloquent.
That's one way to think of it.
I'm glad that we had Nealon, who has the best voice, read that review out loud to us.
They almost gave us 4 stars, Kellen.
Well, that's because you talk. Oh, no. There is some...
that we're responsible
There are
for the
some
almost
paradoxes
business star?
inherent in this.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm surprised you're not more mad, Mark.
I mean, I can see that your fans would be Shifty Squirrels, so
That track.
that's not the clientele that I'm appealing to.
Thank you very much, Shifty Squirrel. We really appreciate that. Let's carry on with our feature topic. Twilight Imperium is perhaps a good example of a game that Mark has been itching to play for a long time, whether he knew it or not. But what we're going to be talking about are games that we know that we want to play because for whatever reason, people have been telling us we need to play them. They have mechanics or systems that appeal to us on such a fundamental level that it's almost absurd that we haven't played them yet. We're going to do this as a top 5 countdown. So let's start us off with Kellen's number 5 game.
The Good Doctor. The Good Doctor has auctions. My number 5 game is The Good Doctor's Modern Art.
Oh, you have played Modern Art?
No.
Holy
I haven't.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I love this game so much.
And Paula Deming gushed about it on a previous episode, The Orchid Tank. Do you think she thinks you're funnier than I am, Mark?
Yeah, because she has great taste. What are you talking about? Is that a question?
Mark is going
The way
to
you
do
said that, it sounded like it was a question, but I thought that was a statement
a
of fact.
panel with Paula Deming
Yeah.
at Shuck.
She said, I want the funny, I want you.
I actually asked Christina about it, and I was like, don't tell Mark and Neela I'm asking you this question. Is Mark funnier than me?
Yeah, she said. Let's just want to know. Are we going to have to invite the Blue Tank back on? Because people want her on, too.
She said you have good one-liners. That's all I'll say. Modern Art is a auction game of auctions. There's multiple different types of auctions that happen in a game of Modern Art. There is sort of this changing economy as different artists become more or less important and their art gets valued appropriately. I have had the new Cool Mini or Not edition for more than a year now on my shelf of shame, which is extremely shameful. And I've always wanted to play it, and I think I've brought this up on the podcast a few times that I've wanted to play it, and it's not that long. How have we not played Modern Art?
Yeah, I need to play this too.
I love this game so much. I actually just traded a listener, funnily enough, for the Korean version of this.
Mm-hmm.
So
The Stamps one?
No, not the Stamps one.
But a pretty one?
Yeah. So I've now the Oink version. I have the Korean version, which is beautiful, and the regular one that you have, the boring one.
The beautiful Cool Mini or Not?
Actually, I do like it a lot. I've played that one, and I like that a lot. But this is such a good game. This is top 3. I think that I had this on my number 2 Knizia game. I love this game. This is my favorite auction game.
That is Modern Art.
On my list, my number 5 game is a game that I have actually not heard a lot of people say that I should play. This is just a game that I have, and I feel like the likelihood is I'm not going to like it, or I'm not going to like the mechanics of it, but this game is Kremlin. This is an old game from the 80s about intrigue in Russia, in the old Soviet Union.
Is this the basis for Nothing Personal?
Oh, maybe it is. I think it might be. I think you're right. Yes. So I've had this for a while. Whenever I look at it, I have 2 feelings. A, I want to play it, and B, who the hell am I going to convince to play this old game from the 80s with me, Kremlin, about intrigue in the Politburo. So this is a game about influencing the Russian parliament. You have control over different people in the government chambers, and they age out and they move up the ranks. It's a game that I think it suffers from the issues that you find in old games, but I like games that have that intrigue. It has like a sort of a hidden information, like who does Kellen control, who does Neela control. I like the weirdness about like your players getting older, and the older they get, the higher chance they have of dying because of old age or because of like other things. And I just like historically, as I've said in previous podcasts, I love games that are steeped in history, and all these people in the game are actual people from the Soviet Union. So for me, number 5 is Kremlin, a game that I want to play, but I don't know if I ever will.
Mr. Vassal made a new version of this game called Nothing Impersonal. Cites it as sort of the inspiration.
Okay.
It definitely has that sense. I've only played Nothing Personal, but you get a cool mafia guy, and he can help you for a while, but then he slowly ages out to where it's no longer helpful.
Got it.
And so you kind of see different waves of things happening. So you have it for a while, but it doesn't last forever.
Okay, so that is like Kremlin, yeah.
I would love to play Kremlin.
Okay, down.
My number 5 game, when Kellen started talking about his number 5 game, I was worried for a second that the Blue Tank had accidentally not struck the game off one of our lists, and I'd have to like extemporize about a whole new game. But my game is also a Knizia auction game. It is Ra. We spoke about this earlier in the show. This seems to be the Knizia auction game that everyone compares all other auction games to, really. It's a game that multiple people have nagged me that I have to play if I call myself a Knizia fan at all, which I kind of do. But I've somehow just never played this. It is a pretty pure auction game from what I understand. Like, I'm probably actually going to need you guys to weigh in a little bit more about how you feel about Ra. Is it as good as everyone says it is?
I think it is. I think it's my number 3, if memory serves, Knizia games, and top 3 auction games. I don't know if I would call it a pure auction game. It's
okay.
It is an auction game, much more of an auction game than
Taj Mahal.
For sure. But it's not as much of an auction game as the game we talked about last week, QE, for example.
Okay.
There's a little bit more gameriness to it, but it's fantastic. It's a great game. I can't see you
not liking it. Okay,
You might not love
absolutely.
it, but I can't see you not liking it.
Sure.
It's incredibly streamlined. I think, the whole thing is over in 40 minutes.
Yeah, I like the sound of that a lot. Just a very short, good, tight auction game sounds great to me. That's Ra.
My number 4 game that I am ashamed to have never played is a Uwe Rosenberg title. So I have much love for Agricola, and Agricola has a sequel, and that sequel is fantasy themed. So I'm here, I'm ready. Why haven't I played Caverna, the Cave Farmers, my number 4?
This was very close to being on my list as well.
Stealing your thunder.
You keep butting in, Neelan.
I'm so sorry.
And saying the word I.
Oh, my God.
Caverna is what I think I want when Neelan wants to play A Feast for Odin. I may want to play Caverna. I have not played it, so maybe I'm wrong. There's obviously a ton of paths to victory, and it takes away a lot of the tightness that Agricola has. But the theme is charming. I'm just so into it. I'm always involved in conversations about Uwe Rosenberg, and it's like I keep clinging to Agricola, so I want to bring Caverna into the fold.
That's really interesting, because thinking about you and Caverna, my gut is saying that you would not like it, but I can see it being a alternative to Feast for Odin, and therefore something maybe you'll like, but my guess is that you won't. But I don't know. I have this, so we should do this right after Kremlin.
Tonight.
Let's do it. My number 4 game is a game that listener Daniel and I were talking about at Strategicon. This is a game that I made one of my greatest flea market buys of all time. Bought it for $10. This is the Out of Print Feld Macao. I don't really know much about Macao, except that I got it for a song. But the way Daniel was describing it to me, and to be frank, I don't remember the details exactly, and I don't really know very much about this game, had me very intrigued. There's some aspect to it of you have a compass rose, and you can draw 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, some number of resources which allow you to take actions. But if you draw, for example, 3 resources, those 3 resources are allotted to you in 3 turns from now. And if you get 6 resources, they're allotted to you 6 turns from now. So yes, you're getting more actions, but the cost of that is that you're not getting them for a greater number of turns. So that seemed interesting. I could get 1 action right now, or I can get 6 actions 6 turns from now. And, I don't know enough about the game to talk about it further or talk about what's further interesting about it. But just that one mechanism was enough to make me want to play my copy of Macao.
My number 4 game is Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game. Give me a smile, Kellen. What was that for?
They made a computer game out of this.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard it's real good.
There's a lot of them.
Really?
Few, yeah.
Okay, I should check those out.
You should be playing Tapestry, bro. You're so behind the time.
Apparently. But the reason that this has been on my mind lately is because Tapestry has kicked off a bunch of discussion in the Discord about what a Civilization game even is, of which I've been active participant in those arguments. But mostly my actual education in Civilization games does come from the video games. Like, I grew up playing Civilization 1 in the early 90s. I've played a lot of them. I haven't played all of them, but I've played a lot of them as they come out. There's Civilization 6 is the latest version of these. I don't know exactly how inspired, if at all, the video game is from the original 1980 board game. It may or may not be. But that said, there is a board game version of this put out by Fantasy Flight, and I want to say maybe 10 years ago, that is supposed to be quite good. It is based on the video game. It is called Sid Meier's Civilization, after all. It is a grand civilization affair that takes 3 or 4 hours and replicates a lot of the systems where you have units that you're upgrading, that you move around the map. It is a 4X game in every sense of the word. Like, Civilization is one of the purest 4X video games. So as someone that is a fan of that genre and is a fan of Civilization, the video game, this feels like one that I just should have played at some point. I know it's a long affair. I don't know anyone that has it, so I would have to acquire it and find the time to play it, but it seems silly that I haven't. That is Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game.
Not A New Dawn, not Civ A New Dawn.
Nope.
Both different games.
Yep.
My number 3, game that I'm ashamed to have not played. And a lot of the games on my list are actually discussions that I want to have with others about how they compare and contrast. And I'm unable to do so because I have not played that game. So this game for me is Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is the number 3 ranked game on Board Game Geek. It is a engine builder, tableau builder, sci-fi themed game. So on the face of it, I'm in. The Martian comes out, Stronghold game says, how can we capitalize on this? They make Terraforming Mars. And whenever we play a tableau builder, an engine builder, we play Pax Pamir 2nd Edition, we play a game like Glory to Rome, we play a game, all of these different games somehow inevitably Everdell get compared back to sort of the granddaddy of tableau builders right now, which is Terraforming Mars. There are so many versions of this game with expansions and optional variants and modules that I would want to be guided through this experience by a Terraforming Mars expert that would expertly weave which expansions I should use. So if you are that expert, please let me know. We will play Terraforming Mars. You're not that expert. Don't even think about it.
I'm definitely not that expert.
Good.
I also think you're going to hate it.
Why do you think he's going to hate it?
I just think it's too much. It's too Euro. It's not interactive in the ways he wants it to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's the number 3 game of all time.
But not your number 3 game of all time after you play it. My number 3 game on this list is a game by Splotter. This is Indonesia. I want to play this for a number of reasons. One, because it's Splotter and they always have sort of unique designs. 2, because of the mechanics where there's like a merge mechanic where you can take over somebody else's company, sort of like a hostile takeover, and you can just take over the company. I know it has a very interesting logistics aspect where you're trying to ship goods to different cities and you may be forced to ship goods at a negative cost to you if you don't plan things right. So that it seems like very, for use of a word we've been using a lot in this episode, brutal game in that respect. I know there are multiple eras and the board sort of changes its look during these 3 eras. So that seems interesting to me. But the thing that has always been a hook to me about this game are the resources. So the 5 resources in this game are spices, standard, rice, okay, a little more exotic, but not so much, oil, whatever, rubber, getting more interesting,
Sure.
and microwavable meals.
Yeah.
So the 5
basic food groups.
Right. I don't know. It's just a weird reason that I've had this on my list for a while, but I'm sure it's for everything that I know about this game. It's a game that I'll enjoy. I just still haven't had a chance to play Indonesia by Splotter.
You've never played Indonesia by Splotter? Shame.
My number 3 game, I might cheat a little for this one. My number 3 game is by probably my favorite designer, Vlade Chvátil. And there are 2 games that are, for whatever reason, just sort of games I just not played. I don't know why. I love his designs. I've had ample opportunity to play these games over the years. One of our friends, Dan, has been bugging me to play one of them for a very long time, but there are Dungeon Lords and Dungeon Petz. I don't know too much about them, except that Dungeon Lords seems to be quite heavily inspired by Dungeon Keeper, the video game, which is one of my favorite video games of all time. Vlade is quite good at sort of, it seems like one of his things is taking video games and sort of reimagining them as board games. Dungeon Petz, I know, is supposed to be quite a substantially different game, and I think a lot of people prefer it to Dungeon Lords. So at some point, I need to try one or both of these, but definitely Dungeon Petz, which I'm going to say is probably my number 3 game that I need to play.
Have you played either?
I've played and enjoyed Dungeon Petz. I've heard Dungeon Lords is not as good, but I did enjoy Dungeon Petz quite a bit.
You like cleaning up poop. That's part of the game in Dungeon Petz.
It's one of my favorite things.
That's huge.
No, I mean, it's a big part of the game.
I know. I'm saying. That's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That's part of the appeal. That's why I want to play it so much.
Microwavable meals and poop.
Should have been my number 2.
Such a bad joke. My number 2 game that I am ashamed to have never played is also 2 games, so I am cheating like Neelan. Back when I first got into the hobby, Catan was all the rage. I have played and enjoyed Catan many, many times with my friends and family. I have not played it in many years. I have always wanted to be able to talk about Cities and Knights and Seafarers of Catan, but have never played either of them. A lot of people bring up Seafarers as an expansion that sort of makes the base game just a little bit better, adding in some ports and some different elements that I don't really understand, and that the Cities and Knights game really ups the complexity of Settlers of Catan and changes it and gives more focus on some kind of war or combat-y-ish thing. I've always wanted to play them. I don't know that it'll ever come up in our modern context. Have you guys played either of these 2 classics?
I have not.
No, I only just played Catan for the first time this year.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that is true.
You played it 2 players, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
The preferred way to play Catan.
You don't feel any shame, Mark, having never tried either of those?
Either of those versions? I mean, not really. I bet they're good. I mean, the thing is, I'm sure that I like them. It's such a shallow thing, but the idea of playing a very good version of Catan is not something that is it's something I want to jump at. I'm sure if I played it, I'm sure if you wanted to play it and we played it, I would have a great time. I have no reason to believe otherwise, but it's not something I'm clamoring to play. My number 2 game is by a designer whose other games I enjoy quite a bit. Imperial 2030 I love, Concordia I love, Navigador I love, and I just traded for another game of his, Hamburgum. But this is a game that I've had for quite a while and I've never played. Antike II by Mac Gertz. I know Mark Bigney of So Very Wrong About Games loves this game. I'm sure I'd love it. I love Rondell games, but I have not played this, and I have it, and so that's stupid. And I'm going to play Antike II soon.
My number 2 game.
Antike II is my number 2 game. 2-2. 2 at 2.
My number 2 game is Trickerion. This is a game that I feel I need to play for a bunch of reasons. The Victorian magic, this is going to sound so weirdly specific, but the theme about Trickerion is Victorian magic, which is actually weirdly not a passion of mine, but it's something I'm incredibly interested in. I used to be an amateur magician when I was younger.
Hold on.
I know.
The podcast is over. We got to stop the podcast.
But moving swiftly along.
And are there pictures? Do a trick for us now, a Victorian trick.
Where's your costume?
Good sir.
Get it out of the closet.
To be fair, I wasn't amateur Victorian magician. I was
that's not what I heard.
A regular 20th
Play the tape back.
century
Hold on. I'm going to play the tape back right now.
I used to be an amateur Victorian magician.
And as the listener just heard, that's exactly what you said.
But I did like the idea of looking into the way that old magicians did their tricks, because it ended up being this thing where they were the forefront of technology in some ways, because they were just coming up with things that people literally couldn't explain. I mean, that's the premise of what magic is. And one of the only ways you can do that in a world that is on the burgeon of new technologies is by creating intricate devices that allow you to do that. So it's just a very fascinating period in what is an interesting sort of profession, for lack of a better word, that goes back centuries.
So when you're conversing with these other amateur magicians online, and they say, "Have you played Trickerion?"
Yeah.
To like talk about it, you feel shame.
Yeah, and all the magic. And all the amateur magician forums that I'm in, all the magicians tell me that like I need to play this game. When they hear I'm a board gamer, the first thing they ask me is, "Have you played Trickerion?"
And you say, "Wow, I'm a f***ing idiot."
Yeah, I'm a fool. Why am I even here? But second to that, also, I like the designers of Trickerion. I like Mind Clash games. So this feels like a game I need to play. That is Trickerion.
My number 1 game that I am most ashamed to have not played is in the Dudes on the Map genre. This is one of my favorite genre of board games. I love discussing sort of the difference between Cthulhu Wars, a Sandy Peterson game, and Glorantha, the Gods War, a Sandy Peterson game, and Kemet, and Inish, Chaos in the Old World. The one I have not played from Macao, Cyclades. Cyclades is my number 1. It's not the most well-known game in that series, but the series of games, Kemet, Inish, and Cyclades, are sort of a set. Love the idea of having this set of Dudes on a Map games with differences. And Cyclades is the auction version of Dudes on a Map. And I had the game at my house for over a year. It was not my game. I had to give it back. And I never once played it during that year. I read the rulebook. I read the rulebook twice. Somehow I've not gotten it to the table. I think I will like it. I know there's a couple different versions and some expansions, Titans, that apparently is quite good. I've always wanted to do it, and I always like to frame games that I talk about with other games that are similar, and this is why Cyclades is my number 1. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so. I think it's a point of contention, I'm pretty sure.
Cyclades?
Yeah, I think that's the alternative version. I have this game. I have Titans. I have also the pack that allows you to play the Kemet monsters in Cyclades.
Yeah.
I played this game once with non-gamers, and I sort of could see how it was good, but didn't have a great time because they weren't really grokking it. So this is a game that I would love to play again for sure. It's funny that a lot of these games that we're talking about, one of us owns. So
right.
It'd be cool to try them all out.
Well, you own all the games.
That's true. Fair point.
Or are they the local YMCA's board game?
Well, we have a working agreement, them and I. My number 1 game, the doctor's coming up on the podcast yet another time. This is
Stevenson's Rocket.
No, well, that's a
Damn
good one.
it.
That's a good one. That is actually one that I really, really want to play.
Almost made my list.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, cool. But this is, I think, the most highly regarded of his games I have yet to play. I also own this. This is Amun Re. Have you guys played Amun Re?
Nope.
Okay, this is a game that I've wanted to play for a long time. It's a Knizia game.
It's an auction game.
It's an auction game.
Why did he make Ra and Amun Re?
What's
both?
that?
Like, it's like
because he loves Egyptians.
One feels
what's
like
wrong with loving? What's wrong with?
Wait,
are you saying there's something wrong with loving Egyptians and the Egyptian theme? I think that's what you're saying. I'll have you know that you're sitting across from an Egyptian person right now. See?
I know
this is what we're talking about.
We learned he's a magician today, dude. Okay, I get who you are.
They used to call me the Egyptian magician on the soccer field. No, that's not true, but I wish it was. So, yeah, Amun Re. I know it's an auction game. I know actually it's an auction game a lot like Cyclades in terms of if you want to outbid somebody, you're outbidding them on a track. So you're bidding not one number up, but the next section of the track up. So that's interesting. I know it's got 2 phases. So there's like a DK in the middle and then you've got like sort of a new board. It's a game that I've always wanted to play and it's a game that we should play. We should have one weekend where we play all our number 1 games.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, we could do that very easily, assuming
I thought you were just going to say all of our Knizia auction games that were on our list.
We could do that
yeah,
too.
we could do all 15
We
of
could
them.
transition. We could do the top 3 haven't played. Amun Re's the last one, and then go into the other 2
Right.
auction.
We don't even know what his number 1 is.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a dumb one.
It's probably going to be a dumb one. My number 1 game is Chaos in the Old World.
Oh, good one.
This is a Dudes in the Map game that I think a lot of people consider to have inspired Cthulhu Wars, even if the Sandy Peterson won't admit to it. Is that right, Kellen?
A Sandy Peterson game.
They also in the old world.
A Sandy Peterson game.
So this is an asymmetric Dudes in the Map game by Eric Lang. It is in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, which is a universe I have a lot of affinity for. I grew up playing a lot of Warhammer Fantasy when I was in high school. I'm not like deep into the lore of it or anything, but I love it was the inspiration for Warcraft, that sort of aesthetic with just big dudes and sort of orcs and like a slight twist on Lord of the Rings that hadn't been done in this very sort of graphic comic style. And Chaos in the Old World sort of seems to live up to that, where you have 4 different factions represented, chaos, etc. And I should play this because as someone that likes Warhammer and likes asymmetric Dudes in the Map games and certainly likes Cthulhu Wars, it just feels weird that I haven't played this. When we start talking about our favorite Dudes in the Map games and people say you haven't played Chaos in the Old World, just feels weird. That is my number 1 game.
I'd love to play more of this. I have not really rated it because I've only played it the one time. One of the things I dislike about asymmetric games and Korn in the game, first of all, someone being named Korn, horrible. Second of all, if everyone doesn't sort of gang up against Korn just sort of default wins, which is always annoying in those first plays, I guess. But yeah, I'd love to play Chaos in the Old World. But we need to get the 5th player expansion. The Horned Rat. No, you don't. It's very expensive. You don't have anything expensive.
I got it on
You
Facebook.
live in a gym.
I got it on Facebook in a Facebook game seller. Sold it to me for like $50. The base.
The Horned Rat?
Both.
You got both?
1 plus 2 equals both.
That's just maths.
I did. I literally did. I have not played it yet. We should do it. We should do Chaos in the Old World, Cyclades, Amun Re, Raw, Modern Art, call it a night. Boom. Go to sleep.
Call it a
Go the whole day.
Call it a 72-hour period.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
That is going to do it for our 5 games that we're ashamed that we haven't played. And that is going to do it for the episode. Thank you all so very much for listening to us. If you want to reach out to us, we're on all the social media you can think of. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. Follow us on all of those. Also, we are on Discord. We love our Discord. We talk about it very often because it's, as always, our favorite place in the world to sort of hang out and talk board games. We've had an influx of new people this week, and it's been very cool. It's like the conversation is just, it's hard to keep up with, man. It just keeps going. There are people talking about heavy games, 18xx games, party games. It's fantastic. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for letting us use What's in Your Mind, Kid as our intro and outro music.
And thank you to Target for sponsoring the podcast. You can find many great board games in your local Target store or at target.com. That's TARGET.com.
Target is a fun place to shop.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Kobayakawa.
Okay, so we'll do. I'll throw it to you first. I